Sorry for. Okay.
Hey, Blender Bob here at Bcon 2022. We're all laughing because we've been talking for 15 minutes, and Sir just told me, I think we're not live. So we've been talking and talking and talking, and now I see the stream and I see people like, I can't wait. It's gonna be nice. And now, as it started, well, yeah, it just started. I'm sorry about that. So let's start from the beginning. Okay, so we are going to talk about VFX and how we can use Blender in the VFX industry. So I'm Blender Bob. I work for Real by Fake in Montreal. We're a small company, but what we do is VFX. And when I started the job there as CG supervisor, I had to make a call. Do we continue with Maya, Arnold, the way we were, or going with Blender? So it's a big decision because you need to start with a software that very few people know, at least in Montreal. No, Blender is not super popular. And it was at 2.8. 2.8 just came out. There was a lot of missing features and everything, but I kept following on what's going on with Blender. And I knew that, okay, so Alembic is there, VDB is coming, and Mentaflow is coming, and there was stuff that's coming. It was getting interesting. And I made some tests. I made a lot of tests. And I tried some scenes that we did in Arnold, and I tried the same thing in Blender, and it was day and night. I mean, there was a shot we did with a bunch of trees for the morning show, and we had to send it to a render farm because our local render farm couldn't render it. It cost us like $6,000 in render time, and at the end we get something that flickered like crazy because Arnold, with small details and everything, just cannot handle it properly. And I tried the same thing in Cycles. It just goes like... Okay, so my 20-minute in Arnold just took a minute and a half in Cycle and doesn't flicker. It's like, okay, so I made a bunch of tests like this. Like we had a bird flying, so I tried the motion blur in Arnold, tried the motion blur in Cycle. The motion blur in Cycle was just gorgeous, beautiful, was working well for something that moves very fast. Tried with a helicopter, with a radial motion, and I didn't have to set any settings or how many steps I want, just by default, I got perfect motion blur. And so did a bunch of tests like this, and we decided to go for Blender. And we have no regret about it. And seriously, when we hire people, we have to tell them, okay, we're using Blender. Are you willing to learn that software? And some of them are hesitant, but I'll give it a shot. And now I can tell you that 100% of the people in my team, none of them want to go back to Maya because we just love Blender. We just realized that, hey, this is like, it's not just a new toy, it's a new way of working. Of course, there's a learning curve when you've been using Maya for so many years. Then you have to try a new software. It's hard to do, especially for me, because I've been using Maya since it was beta, actually, in 96.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't even out yet. So I saw the entire development of Maya for all 26 years or something like this. And going to Blender, I mean, the first time I opened Blender, it was 2.79. And because a friend of mine kept telling me, you have to try Blender. And I'm there clicking with my mouse, and I see this little cross that keeps changing places when I click on the screen. And okay, what is that cross here? I have no idea what it is. And I tried to move the camera using Shift, Control, and alternate, and nothing moves. And I was like, okay. And then stuff started to pop up because I was clicking on the right, on the right mouse button. Anyway, I was just like, no, I cannot work with the software. I don't want to learn all that stuff. Then 2.8 came out, and it was a complete revelation, and it was a completely different thing for us. So now I have two guests with me. I would let them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Serge Mayorov. I'm of Blackboard VFX. We're a studio based in Israel.
Hey, I'm Sergey. I'm with Blender for a number of years now. Working on all sorts of different areas in there.
So as a developer?
As a developer, yes.
And developer.
Now VFX is actually how I started developing for Blender, starting with the motion tracking.
Motion tracking. And how long have you been working for Blender?
Since 2011.
Okay.
11 years.
Oh, wow. That's pretty. So you know it very well, huh?
Yeah.
Cool. You know every line of Blender, every millions of lines of...
Not really, because the development accelerated so much in the past years, especially with all the geometry nodes and a lot of other things. So it's quite hard to have a hands-on experience with all the code base now.
Yeah, it's actually insane how fast Blender evolves. If you look at the what's new in Maya, for example, you will have like they mostly work on animation because they know that, okay, so we have 99.9% of the market, and now Maya is used in the big studios for modeling, rigging, animation, and that's about it. Textures are done in Mari and they're done in Substance and all this stuff, and they will use Katana for to do the shading, render in RenderMan, whatever. And if you want to do VFX, of course, it goes to Houdini. So that's why I think they don't develop it that much anymore, because like, okay, we're comfortable, we have the market, so we don't care. But you just listen to Pablo every Monday when he explains what's coming up, and there are so many things going on, and you wonder like, how come such a small team can do so much? So many things happened in the last 2 years. I mean, last time I looked at the what's new in Maya for modeling, it was like we added a rivet, so you can rivet something on a geometry. Like, well, we added a plugin to do this in 1996. It's like, that's it, that's new, that's the only thing you did in modeling. So that's one thing that I love about Blender. Now, here at the conference, if you look at everything that's going on, there's a lot of demonstrations about cartoony animation. Because a lot of people use Blender for cartoon stuff. We use it for VFX, and we're like a very small part of Blender that, very few, not that many people use Blender for VFX. And that's what I'm trying to promote with my YouTube channel, Blender Bob, is to promote Blender as a very viable, very good tool to do VFX. And we do it not just for commercials, but we do it for Amazon, for Apple, for Netflix, for Hollywood movies. So we use Blender for really big productions. Now, Sergey, you also use Blender to do VFX. Yeah. Can you tell me about what works, what doesn't work? What are how is Blender working for you?
It's perfect.
It's perfect.
That's it.
So, okay, well, thank you. And it's been nice having you on the podcast.
Well, actually, again, it's, as I said before, I really like the real timeness of Blender. We use Cycles and Eevee for all the productions. And the only thing that I've stumbled upon that I had some problems with is color grading, because the color graders, they're getting the output, the EXRs and stuff, and they're mad at me because I don't really get the idea behind color transforms and color spaces and stuff like that. So I wish it's just gonna be a bit more streamlined through the software itself, because again, I'm outputting it to After Effects, and so yeah, this is what I wish for. But the rest is great.
Mm-hmm. Color management is always an issue, and we decided to use Blender in ACES because there's some kind of hack you can do to transform or to use ACES in Blender, and we had to do this because otherwise, by default, you get Filmic, and Filmic gives you a beautiful result, but if you stay in Blender, but if you try to get out of Blender, that one becomes problematic because you want to go into Nuke, and we export everything as an EXR files. We only use EXR, and because we have multiple layers and we want to keep all the AOVs and everything, and EXR is such a powerful files, but not file system, but a powerful, what's the word? Help me here.
Powerful
format. It's such a powerful format. This is what we use, and every big company I work for, everybody use EXR. But when you save a file in EXR, it doesn't get the color profile with it. So you bring this into Nuke, and what you're going to get is not going to look at like what you had in Blender. And that's why we use ACES, because with ACES, everybody speaks the same language. So you do something in ACES, you bring it into Nuke, looks the same. You bring it into Houdini, looks the same. So everybody's happy with this. So in Blender, so I said the ACES is a hack right now. There are some issues, tiny issues. We can live with them. I mean, the color picker sometimes just go crazy. If you want to look at your renders, the colors will be wrong. That's about the only two issues we had with ACES. So, we're fine. We can live with it. We will survive. It's no big deal. It's not a showstopper. Yeah. So on the Blender side, what's going on with ACES? Any talks about getting a proper implementation of ACES in Blender?
Short answer is yes. The longer answer is a bit longer. So basically, we do want to have, the ACES as an option and maybe ship it as some built-in preset or something like that. And maybe also make it more straightforward to use your own custom open color configurations, because from the library point of view they say, okay, so just set up environment variable to this value and then it will pick it up and it should work. And that's how it seemed to be used in many productions outside of Blender, like not only in Blender, which is like, you can say, okay, it's not very user friendly, but that's what it is. But for Blender, it would be nice to have like, a toggle, okay, so in which open color configuration you're working with. Is it something pre-built? Is it pre-built Rec 709? Is it pre-built, well, not pre-built, they're distributed by default Rec 709 or ACES, or do you have something in your custom project? Like, we have a concept, like upcoming concept of projects where you can set up certain things for your specific project you're working with, and nothing really prevents you from making open color configuration part of it as well. So, and then it becomes a question, okay, so technically it's quite easy. It's like, okay, so it's just one file path and you just like load files from different places. How do you present it on the user interface where it belongs to? Is it user preference? Is it project preference? Is it something we also store in a blend file? Because you can imagine that, like, you wanted to have asset library somewhere in your studio. And then, okay, what happens if you use different color profiles on different projects? Well, we can say, well, don't do it. But then you can say, okay, so there are people who would like to share assets online, right? And then you inevitably run into issue, okay, so asset was created for ACES and you try to use it in your default Rec 709 profile, and then you need to do some tricks to match colors a bit better from, like, if you just interpret values as if they are ACES already, which could work or couldn't, like basically might want, like, you basically might run into, like, obscure render results in that case. And I also heard that some of the workarounds, you don't see the proper calls at render. So from my understanding, like, if you went through the hoops of pointing Blender to the custom open color configuration, the render output should be correct. So it might be a bug. So
Or a feature.
No, I mean, if you don't get the the proper like colors output, it's probably bug.
Okay.
Color picker is another thing which you would need to work on because it's kind of very limited. And the other thing we're also discussing is basically per window display device configuration, because you can imagine that you might have your regular monitor, you might have your HDR monitor, or you might also have the XYZ projector. And it would be nice to, like, split Blender in different windows. Say, okay, so you are on XYZ projector now, so, like, do your things.
Yeah, and projector, cinema projector have another color profile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then again, it's like this, like, technically it's quite simple. Okay, so just like, if I know which, like, color space to use for this window, it's quite easy. But then how do you make this configuration in a user-friendly way? So, and that part we didn't design yet.
Yeah. ACES is important, VFX. I mean, if you do cartoon stuff and you stay inside Blender, stay with Filmic, you're going to be happy. It just works. You're fine. The thing is that the idea behind ACES, to kind of oversimplify the concept, is that you shoot something with an Alexa and you shoot something with a Red and you shoot something with a Sony camera. They all have different color profiles. And if something was shot with two different cameras, the colors won't match when you bring them. So the idea of ACES is to say, I got a color profile for the Alexa, whatever model of Alexa, and I'm going to convert it, if you want, into this big ACES color space, and I will do the same thing with the Red, and I will do the same thing with the Sony camera, and they should, in theory, match. And then you can do whatever you want, and then you can output it to whatever you want. You can say, okay, it came from a Sony, but I want to output it as an Alexa color space. You could do it. That's the idea. Is like ACES is kind of this middle in between thing to go in, you do your stuff, and then you go out. And there are different color spaces. You can say at the output, I want a Rec 701 or I want a Rec 2020 or whatever you want. So that's the idea behind it. And because we do VFX, we get stuff that comes from every kind of camera, as you can imagine. So it's a must for us. We have to use it. There are some issues with ASUS when you have like super saturated colors that it will clip sometimes and issues like this. But we never ran into this so far. So we've been okay. And we can always cheat in COM. There's always ways to deal around it. So
Yeah, it's you don't get the magic always done.
yeah. Let's talk about moving assets from one software to another. Is this something you run into from time to time?
Okay, so again, the pipeline consists of the client sometimes sending us assets, and it's not a big issue for us because again, part of the deal is that we have a few days just to figure it out and to import everything and to transform everything. If you're talking about Alembics, we use those a lot with animators from around the world when we outsource something, and it's a breeze. The only thing we have issues with are to teach the riggers and the animators to not change anything in the library.
Yeah.
Because when the animator needs something new and or there's a bug and the rigger is changing something, they have to be as clean and neat as possible. Or else, when I get the Alembics, I have to re-import everything instead of just having a switch like it should be. So this is the hard part, the communications between the parties of the project.
Mm-hmm.
So,
in our case, we have to deal with assets that come from everywhere. Sometimes it comes from other companies. Sometimes we just buy assets because you need a car. You're not going to model a car. You just go on any places, CG Trader, Turbo Squid, whatever. You buy the car,
of course.
But sometimes of course, when it's a custom thing like a spaceship, we have to do it. We have to model it. But and all these models comes in different formats. Sometimes it's a 3ds Max, and then we're screwed. We don't have 3ds, and like, okay, what do we do? So we need to find someone who has a license for 3ds Max to convert it for us, or sometimes you can go online to do it. There are some websites that can do it for you. So
friends with Max, we call them.
Yeah, friends with Max. And one thing that could help a lot is USD, actually.
Yeah,
USD is Universal Scene Description. It's developed by Pixar, and the idea is to have something actually universal, so that you could go from one software to another and everything would work. We're not there yet. It's still a work in progress. For the geometry, it works pretty well, but for shaders, that's another issue because every software has their own renderer and they have their own pipeline and stuff. There are some similarities. For example, the principal shader in Cycle is very, very similar to the Disney shader for RenderMan. It's almost all the same settings, and
it's based on a paper from them.
It's based on this, yeah. And when RenderMan came out for Blender, I tried it. Of course, I had to give it a shot, and I could just plug all my settings from one to another, and I get the exact same result. So that was pretty cool. Now, if we could have a shader system that could work on every software, that would be awesome. And that could be Material X.
Well, that's what it seems where it's all going to, because this is this recognized problem in the industry, and it seems like everybody is excited about Material X, and a lot of work was done on that side.
Yeah.
But it's like it's kind of always like painful to integrate new shading library in the existing render engine, and then there are like a couple of questions like, okay, so Material X can give you or cell representation, for example. So it is like, does it mean that in case of Cycle, does it mean that we need to convert everything, like basically made the OSL is the shading representation and get rid of our own SVM based representation? And Yeah, so there is all those design decisions
Yeah.
to be made, and like they all have cons and pros.
And if you have procedural shaders, if you have a noise shader, doesn't mean the noise shader will match the one in material X, so you will not get the same look. So you cannot exactly reproduce what you had with the basic cycle stuff.
Well, if you use material X to generate OSL and then use that OSL representation as if you would use, like, if that OSL network came from an artist, there is no real difference. The difference is mainly, okay, so what if it is something which is not supported on SL? Because if we do it right now, we will lose GPU support because there is no GPU support in official builds as far as I know. There is some work being made.
Oh.
So there are all those like technical decisions and alignment and like the proper moments or where we can say, okay, so now the whatever shading library is mature enough and it covers all of our use cases. So then we can more easily switch over, but we basically don't want to lose this powerful feature of cycles that it can run everywhere.
Yeah, it's easy from the user to say, hey, I want this.
Yeah,
but to implement it, that's another thing.
Well, it's easy to implement when you're in one software, but then you have all those different interested parties basically, and they all need to somehow align and do things. So that's definitely adds some complexity to the entire topic.
And I guess you run into the decision where, well, if we go Material X, do we want to flush everything we had before and only use Material X, or we get two systems at the same time that we develop in parallel? Hey, that becomes complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can understand how complicated it could be. I mean, in a dream world, everything would be like, hey, USD for everything, but there's also another problem is that USD doesn't support bones and things like this. So there's still no way to transfer kinematic and bone system easily. FBX can do it between like my N3D Max because it's Autodesk. They can develop it internally, but doesn't mean it's going to work well when you bring it into Blender and stuff like this. So
yeah, it's a bit wonky when you work with FBXs.
So Blender is getting more and more popular in the industry. I know that ILM is using it. At Method, we had Blender. Actually, Method is like a huge company. They had an office in Montreal, one in Vancouver, one in, India, Singapore, or whatever, a lot of different places. And at the end, when I was there, I was just starting to learn Blender, and I asked, can I get Blender installed on my machine? And the reply was like, what is Blender? So Blender was just known as a hobby tool, which is not the case anymore. Because now it's getting more and more popular. And Method Vancouver already had Blender installed. The modelers were using it.
Really?
Because modeling is modeling. It's very easy to transfer a model from one software to another. Of course, if you use all the modifiers for bevels and stuff like this, you would have to bake them. But still, modeling is modeling. So that's something that you can easily transfer from one to another. And I just spoke with someone downstairs this morning that was telling me that the all-rounders or the generalists at ILM now, they get a training on Blender at ILM.
Really?
So I don't know if it's true, but if it is, I mean, if Blender can get into ILM more and more and more, that's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
On this, because there's always the thing when I talk about VFX and people tell me, yeah, Blender is free. You can save tons of money, tons of money, tons of money. Yes.
It's not about the money.
It is free. And yes, you save some money. But let's say that Maya is like, I don't know, $6,000. How much do you think the artist that works on Maya costs? Way much more. So the problem for a company is not to buy the software, it's to pay the staff. The staff is what is expensive.
But you also now move to the subscription-based licensing. So
Yeah. I'm not crazy about subscription-based. I'm not. And when Adobe bought Substance, I was like, oh no, that's going to be disaster. I own my license. What's going to happen with my license for Substance? And I just wanted to own the software. And of course, first thing they did is, make it, hey, pay per month. You want it, pay per month.
Same thing for ZBrush and Maxon. Many people are really upset about that.
Oh, they did this too?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's like ZBrush was theoretically for your whole life when you buy the license. And the minute they got into Maxon, it's thank you, it was nice and everything, but
yeah, that's very good.
so many people are watching Blender, but again, they're used to software, and now they have to figure out something else. So it's not nice.
But
Yeah.
the question is it like the main like like issue, so to speak, is the fact that Blender cannot support something, or is it the people who would need to learn the new software?
I think that both. You have the tool for like years, and you're used to it, and now you have to rethink everything. And you don't really have a choice when you get a file from someone else, and it's the new ZBrush. Then you have to work with that. You can't backport it. You have to pay. You don't have a choice. And of course, there's the Blender side. People, when they want to jump between softwares, the first thing they search for is the similarities, and they are not similar. They are not similar, and it's a good thing. But again, it's a struggle for them to get there. So yeah.
We were talking about the price of software. I remember when I was at Rhythm and Hues, that was a long time ago in 1999. Rhythm and Hues had everything proprietary. So the modeling software, the rendering, the animation, everything was proprietary. And I went to see John Hughes, the owner of Rhythm and Hues, and I said, why are we using... Because before that, I have to say, I was working at VIFX, and they bought us. So we had 30 or 40, 50 people that just were working like Maya, RenderMan, that comes into a company that has everything proprietary. So there was a little bit of, at the beginning, like, let's do this in Maya, let's do this in our pipeline or whatever. And I asked him, so why do you want to do everything proprietary? And said, well, listen, RenderMan costs $6,000 per license. At the time, RenderMan was $6,000 per license. I said, look at the render farm we have, calculate how many machines we have, multiply it by 6,000. That's a lot of money that I could put on developers that will develop my own version of the renderer. I can do whatever I want with it. I can expand it for, doesn't matter how big my farm is. I don't have to pay any licenses. I don't need to pay for upgrades. And said, look, everybody was working on Softimage and everybody was working on Power Animator. Then Maya came, so everybody had to flush their licenses and move to Maya. That's an awful lot of money also. So this way I control everything. Now, the good thing about an open source software is that you have access to the code. So big companies like ILM and Framestore and MPC, they have the money, they have the resources. They could take the code and they could make it the way they want it. And I think that's what Ton was talking about yesterday in the podcast. He said, we're not going to adapt to Hollywood. Hollywood needs to take what we have and do what they need, do what they want with Blender to adapt it to their needs. And it kind of makes sense to me because Blender doesn't have the resources to just satisfy everything in Hollywood. Hollywood is too big.
Yeah.
But now, if these people develop something, are they going to share it with the rest of the world?
I mean, that's a good question, but like usually, like when you run into start adding all those hacks or like your own custom tools, you inevitably will start digress from the vanilla code base, so to speak, and then maintenance cost of your custom fork becomes so big. So at some point, it's just cheaper. It's like, okay, say, look, this is like everybody's working on this tool anyway. So everybody has, so why not to put it to upstream? And so it's like it's always there. And like, if some big change happens in Blender, it's already kind of ported for them to the new concepts. So they don't need to maintain their own fork that much anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like not that intuitive that, hey, you will actually save more time by streaming things. But that's what happens a lot in the companies.
Yeah. Like in the presentation I did 2 days ago, I was talking about the spreadsheet that we developed to manage all the layers. And so we have this big spreadsheet where we can decide which layer we want to render, which collections, which AOVs, the layer override, the crypto mat. We can manage everything in just one spreadsheet. And the feedback I got from this was like, I want it. I love it. It's awesome. And
I want it.
yeah, yeah. Everybody wants it because once you've tried it, you cannot go back. And especially for us, we deal with super heavy scenes. And when we want just switching from one layer to another may take a while because it needs to reload everything in all the collections and everything. And you create a new collection, and it's on by default on everything. You have to go back to every single layer and turn it off or on or keep it on as needed. For this, it's super simple. And we would love to share this. But the guy who did it, it's hard-coded into our system. And it uses some external libraries, and said even if I wanted to share it, I cannot do it because of the libraries and because of all this and all that. So, so if people want this, they would have to do it, I guess, using the proper way to do it in Blender without using external libraries, or I don't know how does it work when you need external libraries and things like this.
Oh well, that's not a good one. I don't think there is really the process which we follow, like, when we say, hey, we want this feature and it relies on this external library. It's more like, okay, so this is like really like, great feature which we want to have, and it's supported by this library. And like, okay, so it's just decision being made, okay, so let's just put that library because, well, it needs to be GPL3 compatible.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is, it's like, if it's the feature we need and want, well, there is no other way just to accept the library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are the libraries proprietary?
I have no idea. I'm not the one who developed it. So.
Okay.
And so I cannot answer that question. Yeah.
I mean, we have all this like OpenEXR, the USD, the like the Open Image Denoiser, like. There's like a lot of them. There's a huge list.
Oh yeah, I guess. Yeah,
so it's like we do use external libraries.
Yeah, and I think the fact that Blender is open source is it's the main power of Blender, is that everybody can contribute, anybody can modify it the way they want it, and it's total freedom. So I think it's awesome.
It's total freedom. It also helps, like when you work on some libraries, it also allows authors of that library to grab Blender, integrate it, and see, okay, so how it actually behaves in more of the like production environment.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they can early on integrate it without like even going public in the source, because they feel like, hey, it's not ideal yet.
And there are many versions of Blenders that are available that people try. Okay, I want to try this. I want to try this thing, and if it's good, then eventually it could be integrated into the code, and it's. I think for me it's an awesome thing, and the community, the Blender community, is so wide. I mean, when I try to do something, first thing I'm going to do is search on the web. I need to do a lightning. I never did a lightning in Blender. How am I going to do this? YouTube, Blender, lightning. I get 10 tutorials on how to do it, and I just pick the one that works the best. That's the look that I want. All right, let's go for this. And you don't see that much in Houdini or in Maya and other software that big. I don't think there's a community as big as the Blender community. It's huge. It's enormous, and that's such a good tool. And that's actually why I do my podcast, is because I want to share my knowledge. I obviously don't do it for the money, because I get about $80 a month with my channel.
Oh, you get money from the channel?
Well, I turned on the publicity,
okay.
And the reason I did this is to get more visibility.
Okay.
Because I read somewhere that if you don't want the publicity on your channel, YouTube will not promote you too much, because you cost money to YouTube. They don't make money out of you, so why would they want to promote you? So I turned the ads on, and suddenly, now I pop on people's feeds all the time. And but I kept it minimal. I said, okay, I want publicity at the beginning. At the end, very few people reach the end of my clips. Anyway, I can see it with the graph, so I can see the curve. Like, people are watching, and then suddenly, sometimes I actually make jokes in my podcast saying, if you reach this point of my podcast, but my clips, if you reach the end of here, write cookie in the comments. And then sometimes I see like cookie or pizza or whatever, and I see this in the comments. I know, okay, these people went all the way there. So I kept publicity, so just at the beginning, at the end, nothing in the middle. I don't want my stuff to be cut in the center for a shoe commercial. No banners that will cover all the stuff. I don't want anything. It's just like, maybe I would even get more diffusion, if you're more, what's the word I'm looking for, more support or more, anyway, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
YouTube would, more visibility, that's the word I'm looking for. If I put ads everywhere, but I just don't want this. So I do this for the community. I want to share the knowledge, and I want to share that, yeah, Blender, you can do VFX with Blender. So there are things that we also use Houdini at the office for simulations. We tried some stuff with MentaFlow, but we realized that, Houdini is specialized in this. That's what Houdini does, and it does it very well. But we render everything in cycles. So we export everything. And in my clip, there was the first scene from the demo that I showed was in Antarctica, and you have this meteorite that crashes, and you get this big snow flowing. Well, all the sim has been done in Houdini, and it was funny because the guy who did it was very happy because now they had the new renderer in Houdini that's GPU based instead of Mentra. That's like crazy slow. That was ridiculously slow. So he tries it, and it goes like, hey, it's 1 minute per frame. It goes super fast. I'm so happy. And then, okay, let's add the AOVs. And let's add this. Let's add this and that and Cryptomat. And then everything became super slow. So, okay, let's try this in cycle. Hey, it took 30 seconds to render a frame. And I got all the AOVs, and I got everything there. So, and we got a better result. Actually, we got something very cool. So all the explosions, all the stuff that we do, sometimes the explosions will just go from Houdini. We export the VDBs. We do the shading in Blender. And you see, that's a good thing about the community, because I was trying to, at one point there was an explosion. And I thought, well, I cannot shade it properly. I see what the guy does in Houdini, and I try to match it, and I cannot get the same, it's not there. And I actually made a clip about this that I called my wish list. And I said, well, I wish somebody did this. And of course, every time I do a clip, I get people replying to me. If I do something wrong, if I make a mistake, if I have a comma at the wrong place, people will just say, hey, you can do this, you can do that. And so some people just send me some examples of, and I actually put a VDB out, and I said, well, if you want to try it, here's the VDB, give it a shot, just 1 frame. And I got like 5-6 people who send me a recipe to do fire, and I looked at my explosion and was like, this is awesome. Wow. It works. It's, wow, okay, so I can render that stuff in Blender and get the same. Of course, it's not going to look exactly the same as Houdini. It is 2 different renderers, a different shader system and everything, but I get an awesome result. And it's so fast.
It's so awesome.
So now it's just, okay, we bring everything into cycles, and we just render everything into cycles.
There was a rumor about cycles for Houdini or something like that through the UST bridge, but
well, I mean, there is now the discussion about the Hydra.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Hydra delegate.
Yeah, so I'm not sure at which state it is now. There is this Hydra folder in the cycle standalone.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's coming along.
All that stuff that is so exciting.
But
Hydra delegates and
Hydra
all that
delegate.
stuff.
like the thing is, it's like, the for quite some time it was Cinema 4D plugin already for cycles. So it's the main issue is that this glue layer of how you attach cycles to something else. That was something absolutely custom, and that seems to be the biggest stopper for adopting more people cycles as just as a render engine.
Mm-hmm.
And with something with more standardized, it seems like, okay, so yeah, if we support it, it seems like, okay, maybe we'll see much more adaptations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we just wait for support from the people that use the software itself, the alternative software. That's the issue right now.
Well, I mean, it would be ideal if no contribution to improve this Hydra part comes from company who actually uses it.
Okay.
That would be more ideal, because Cycles is Apache license, right? So you can do pretty much whatever.
Whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I lost my line of thought. So why don't you tell us something while I think about what I wanted to say? No pressure. Just put the pressure on you. No, I was thinking about what showstoppers that we have using Blender in our pipeline. And I don't think we have that many. We have paper cuts, But showstoppers, there's nothing that's stopping us right now. Paper cuts, it's a big one, and everybody's talking about this at the conference. I heard this so many times. Is light linking. Everybody wants light linking. Everybody wants it badly. Well, for the meantime, I mean, it's just do it on a other render layer and use Cryptomath and just get what you want. Yeah. That's a workaround. There's always a workaround.
There's always a workaround.
But the light linking, there is a patch, we need to work on it, and it's like one of the features we would want to have in Cycles as well. It's like, again, the time management is the hardest part.
Mm-hmm. And the priorities.
It's priorities and amount of people and time.
Is there anyone dedicated to that, or is it just a project that...
No, it's like we have like few people working on Cycles, and like, and then there is like this priority list, and just do our best to...
Okay.
to tackle everything.
Yeah, like ASUS was it's a paper cut for us. The fact that we show render, it doesn't look good, or the color picker, it doesn't stop us from working.
Well, color picker, that could be something like tricky to solve. The render result, I think we should just submit the bug report.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because I cannot say like why would that not work.
You talk about bug reports. I send a lot of bug reports.
Are they getting fixed?
That's the thing. There are some bug reports I sent to Maya since 2000, and it's not resolved yet.
Oh, my.
And I resubmitted because I was like, maybe it got lost. Maybe they changed their system, whatever. Still there. Never happens. You don't know what happens. You don't get any feedback. You just send it and it just goes into this.
You have no idea what's the status.
The problem was with an extrusion. If you do let's say you have like an L shape and you want to extrude it on a curve, if you do it from the Z axis, it's fine. If you do it from the X axis, then it gets distorted. Why? I have no idea, but it's a bug. And it's really annoying because you want to do like something around like, these buildings around, you want to do all these things, and you just try it and it'll get distorted. Okay, so I will just change my curve, freeze the transformation, redo it, and move it again. It's a workaround, but it's annoying. Blender, I send a bug report, and sometimes it takes like a few hours, and I get something that says tested or approved, or not approved, but it's confirmed.
Yeah.
And then every time there's somebody who writes something, I get an email saying the progress that happens, and it's like, wow, it's like it's amazing. And something that I made one time, I made a clip about the UDIMs. The UDIMs just came out, the first implementation of the UDIMs in Blender, and the way it was treated, what I figured out is that it was an image sequence that starts at 1001 and is continuous. But it's not like that. UDIMs are not an image sequence. They are tiles, and they don't need to start at 1001, and you can have holes in the middle. It doesn't matter. That's the way it should be. So I talked about this, and about a week later, there was like a list of changes that needs to be done on UDIMs, and they fixed everything. Everything that was in my clip was fixed, and I was like, that cannot be a coincidence. I cannot believe this is a coincidence that just after I did this, so I was thinking somebody at Blender is watching my clips.
Maybe you're a YouTube star. So
no. Andrew and Captain Disillusion, they are stars. I'm just like, I can barely. I didn't even reach 30,000 subscribers yet, and I'm trying. I'm stuck there, and I think because some of my stuff I read from the comments, and some of the comments are like this is way over my level of competence, and it's too complicated for me, or it's too, but anyway, because I talk about VFX, so some of the stuff, it doesn't relate to a lot of people. So if I was making a tutorial about how to model a chair, how to model a table, I would probably get more viewers, but that's not what I want to do. I want to promote VFX. Yeah.
Of course.
Another thing that I was talking about one time, I was doing something on compositing, and I was saying, well, if you work in Filmic, you have to set your thing to Filmic. If you bring an image in the compositor in sRGB, it gets converted into Filmic. So how can I do compositing from something that comes from outside? And then a few weeks later, there was a node that was added to override to do conversion. So is it because of my clip or not? Is it a coincidence? I don't know. I will probably never know. But I'm happy that it happened. So
yeah.
So that's my way of trying to contribute, is to try to explain the issues I have. And I think for anybody who does YouTube clips and stuff like this, when you talk about something, the idea is not just to say, I don't like this, or this doesn't work, or this, and blah, 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 but to be constructive and to offer solutions.
Yeah.
Or maybe not solutions, but suggestions.
Yeah.
So how about if it was like this instead? Because just whining for the fun of whining, it goes nowhere. So, and that's something I realized very soon. As I started Blender, I went on the forums, like Blender artists and stuff, and I was just starting in Blender, so everything was new. I knew nothing, and I was like, in Maya, I can do this, blah, 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 and I got people that got so mad, like if I told them their baby is ugly, and they were like, if you're not happy, go back to Maya. I'm just asking a question here, so I realized that, hey, there's a way to approach things.
Yeah.
Just first of all, never mention Maya in forums. Just say, in another software, it's possible to do this. How can I do this in Blender? That's the way to approach things.
Yeah, but, sometimes people are really protective.
Yeah, I can understand it.
Yeah.
I can understand it. And sometimes I do some clips and I promote Blender, but sometimes like the UDIMs and stuff, I had to say, well, this doesn't work and this and that. And I felt like, am I getting getting too rough, or am I going to get the Blender community against me? But no, it went well. And actually, I was wondering when I arrived here, are people going to look at me and say, the Blender people, are they going to look at me and say, like, yeah, you keep complaining about our software. So, you're persona non grata, but it was the complete opposite. I was very well welcomed here. I was really happy. Just the fact that I was right after Ton, for me, it was really touching. It was like, oh, wow, okay, that's such an opportunity. And then Ton asked me to do this podcast, and then he asked me to do the Susan Awards.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I was treated like a king here. So I'm Blender Foundation. Thank you so much, Blender Institute, Blender Studio, Blender, whatever Blender is. Thank you so much. I felt so touched. So
maybe part of love relationship is complaining. So yeah.
Complaining and resolving?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Because we all have the same goal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, the first step towards solving something is like, okay, there is acknowledgement of like, hey, this is a problem. Okay, so this is what it is, and then it's like, okay, so that's like possible way of how to.
Well, the thing is that if the Blender Studio only works on cartoon animation, and they do their request to the foundation, and they say, okay, we need this tool, we need that thing, we need that. It's all related to cartoon animation. When you do VFX, it's a completely different world. And if you don't get feedback from the VFX community, well, you don't know you need to fix it, or you need to add it, or you don't know about it. So that's my contribution. I cannot write code. My contribution is to make suggestions and promote the best I can the software. So
Educational.
Yeah. So how long have we been talking so far?
Without the 15 minutes extra we had.
We did. First time I do a podcast, so I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, Pablo just came and said, you just press this button. I couldn't even do this properly. Just spoke for 15 minutes. At one point, I wasn't even sure, did we talk about this before or after? And Alembic, we talked about Alembic and USD. Did we talk it again? Yeah, we did. Okay, we talked.
Checklist.
Yeah, checklist. Hey, there's a first time for everything. But, in French, there's something that says, le ridicule ne tue pas, which means being ridiculous will not kill you. And I live by that. So you can sit in my clip. I don't care. And I'm the kind of guy who's like, you can throw anything at me. I don't care. You can criticize me. You can do whatever you want. I just don't care. Okay? I just live my life. Nobody will tell me how to live my life. That's my way of living, and I'm happy with this.
That's awesome.
Any last comments? What is it? Do you have a wish list? Do you have some suggestion? Is there something that could make your life better in the Blender world?
No.
No?
My life's great.
We have a happy customer,
Yeah.
and he wasn't paid for that.
Yeah. I wasn't paid for that. Except, again, the paper cuts. But, again, we have workarounds for almost everything. Light linking. Yeah.
Nice linking.
Live linking.
Hopefully coming.
Yeah. For
Coming
me-
soon.
What about you? Are there things that you would like to add to Blender but you cannot because you don't have time or because it's not a priority or
Well, there's so many of them.
so many of them?
Yeah,
Like what?
Well, like the biggest thing is like, you know, like now a lot of like the animation module, for example, the DP module, they're so much more active now. Like I would also like to have like, you know, bring the VFX module in Blender to like, you know, a more active state. But like, you know, it's so far it's just me and Sebastian, like Sebastian having like real work and then me like needing to do like other development targets and whatnot. So it was a struggle so far to find time for it. But like, you know, it's something I would like to like, you know, like start the ball rolling basically in that area again.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, you know, then we can like start like, you know, having the similar thing like, you know, what happens in animation module is like, okay, so this whatever weekly or bi-weekly meetings, like, okay, so what are we working on, like where are we moving, what's the most important thing for the time being, and like discussion like that.
Mm-hmm. The next big thing for us, okay, because we talk about ACES, but we got to work around for this. Material X, well, it's probably coming eventually, so that's fine. The next big thing for us is videogrammetry, Material by Fake. So videogrammetry is, well, photogrammetry is where you take pictures from a lot of different angles, and then you bring it into software. It creates a 3D geometry with the texture on it. It's very good for like rocks and stuff, and it's very useful for a lot of things. Videogrammetry does the same thing, but 24 frames per second. It does it on people moving. So the advantage is that if you just do motion control, motion capture, you will just get the movement, but you don't get the cloth, you don't get the expression, you don't get the hair, you don't get anything. With videogrammetry, you capture a performance. You're not just capturing a movement. So it's awesome because you have somebody dancing and you have all the clothes. You don't need to do cloth simulation. You know, it has a lot of advantages and disadvantages. And I made a clip about this. It's called Crowds or CG Crowds, something like this. Check it out, Blender Bob. And I'm going to talk more about this because we bought this system. And this is a service we're going to offer. Now, the thing about this is it's a bit tricky because each character has like 200,000 polys per characters. But the geometry changes every frame. So imagine the amount of space that it takes. Not only this, the textures change every frame. So that's where it becomes complicated. Because when we did the stadium shots that was in the demo, we had 20 different people in there, or maybe 12. And it was starting to become ridiculously heavy. And we had like maybe 10 layers of rendering, because we usually render all lights in separate passes so we can come them and adjust them, because otherwise it's, you know, oh, this one is too strong, we need to re-render the entire thing. That would be stupid, so we do it separately. Now the problem is that, let me give you an example. You have an Olympic of somebody running, all right? And you do a geonode and you spread this person everywhere. Well, they will all run at the same rhythm.
Yeah.
Because they're all going from the same source. So now what we need is to be able to offset. To have like a little checkbox and say, I want to offset like 10 frames this way, 10 frames this way, so they will all run at a different, a different offset. So, okay, so that could be possible, probably. I don't know how difficult that would be.
I mean, if it's geometry nodes, like, you know, it should be that hard TM to offset, like, you know, the frame from which you're reading stuff from the file.
Mm-hmm. Here comes part two.
Part two is
the textures also need to be offsetted. So the shader needs to know, for this object, I will send frame 1, for this one I will frame 10, and for this one, frame 9.
That still seems solvable, because what we also were requested a lot is when you instance the Blender collection somewhere else, you would want to offset the collection time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bit more complicated because it involves all this animation system and whatnot. And like there is no currently system in place to offset parts of the, effectively it's part of the dependency graph, which goes to a different time.
Yeah.
So it's only one time source currently. We always wanted to bring like back, because in 2.49 we had the time offset for the instances.
Oh yeah.
But it was more like a hack, because it would re-evaluate the collection the group, like every time it redraws the viewport.
Hack it back.
Well, the thing is like with all those hacks, you kind of like lose ability to like really improve performance somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's something like core feature of the dependency graph, then you can ensure okay, so everything is working rock solid, doesn't conflict with each other, and is behaving as fast as it could.
Yeah, because when we tried the videogrammetry stuff, we tried it also with another renderer that I will keep secret because I don't want to. Anyway, we tried with another renderer, and when you import an Alembic and you just spread it, there's just a checkbox offset and just say how many frames, and it works. But it didn't work for the shader. So we wrote to the company, and they made a special version for us that will actually link like this instance will have a tag like a number, and it will just link with the shader to okay, if it's this tag, then put this offset. And I don't know how they did it, but they did this for us. But we would love to do this in cycles. We want to stay in cycle. We want to stay inside Blender. We don't want to use an external renderer because that means we need to convert our entire library of stuff. Everything we have, we would have to redo it completely. We don't want that, so we want to stay inside Blender. So this is our next big issue that we need to get resolved.
We actually use animation nodes for similar tasks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there we have control over the shading process via the index property.
Okay.
So every time we offset the animation for like traffic, we use the same property for the shaders.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you think we could do something with animation nodes?
The only downside is that because it's an external add-on,
Mm-hmm.
the resources it takes are huge.
Yeah.
So we just do that and we bake the thing and then we get the output properly. But it's not easy. It's hogging the resources.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a solution, but it's not perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Videogrammetry is going to get more and more popular. They use it in VR a lot, but it's with low res, of course, because you cannot process that much data live. But it's pretty cool because the advantage is that you get a character and you can relight it if you want. You can turn the camera 360 degrees around it. If you do a stadium and you use it the old way with cards, then you would have cards, somebody on a green screen, and then you make it transparent. So you have to calculate all the transparency and all this stuff, and you're limited with the amount of, the angle you can see that person.
Yeah.
And we tried with different angles. So according to the camera angle, you would get a different render, but it just pops. You can tell it just doesn't work. But videogrammetry allows you to do this. You can do crowds, and you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. And it has a very big future in the industry. So every time you need to do crowds, stadiums, and stuff like this, Rocketman, Bohemian Rhapsody, things like this shows that movies like this that requires big crowds, you need this. If you look at Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocketman, you don't have cameras that goes 360 degrees. So when we did the R&D for all this videogrammetry stuff, it was for a movie that we're bidding on, and we did this demo, and it was like the same producers as Bohemian Rhapsody, and they saw our demo where we just moved the camera all the way around, CG people, we relight them with the fog and everything. It just went, wow, this is absolutely awesome,
Amazing.
So it's new technology that they didn't have on Bohemian Rhapsody.
So
there's a big future for there's a big market for us, big enough for us to buy the system to offer it to clients.
so you're gonna announce that like soon?
We're supposed to get I think in December we're supposed to get the equipment. So we're going to get like a 2 week training to get to know the system, how it works and everything. And then we're going to make some tests for ourselves. We're going to create a library because we could create libraries of people, just going crazy and everything, people running or whatever. We can create a bunch of libraries of stuff that we could offer to clients, and we can make custom stuff. So if it happens in, in 18 something, then we get people dressed as the time and we do it. And we found some tricks where you could, for example, you dress people with a green shirt. So then you can key it and you can change the color of their shirt. And we also have the ability to add geometry to the characters. So we can add a hat, for example. So we could just randomly put different hats on people and it looks like we have different people. So little tricks like this, like accessories or glasses or whatever.
Mustache.
No, not this.
No,
No.
not this.
Oh, so it's limited what you can do. You can change some colors, but you have to make sure that like the shirt will be like super green, so it's easy to key. You don't want a blue shirt because the jeans are blue and it's not going to work. So that's how we've been able to create the stadium scene. We only had 12, like I think it was 12 different characters. But if you look at it, it's really hard to find that, hey, there's only 12 people. So imagine if we sample 100 people, we would get something, mind-blowing.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and now we're finding ways to get the scenes, because this was completely insane how heavy it was to have all these 120,000 characters in the stadium, but still, Blender could handle it, and Cycle can just take anything. You just throw billions of polygons at it, and it just renders it. It was insane. Imagine you have 150,000 people. Each character has what I said. It was how many thousands of polys? I said it was 200,000 poly. I think no, not that much. Anyway, it was super heavy. Of course, in the viewport, it was just like super slow. But you put everything as bounding box, and then it's manageable. And now with the newly discovered is viewport node in geometry node. This is a revelation for us, because that's always been a big issue for us to handle super heavy geometry. It becomes too heavy. Everything is in memory, and it doesn't take long that you just choke. But with this, 2 collection, high res, low res, is viewport and a switch, and that's it. On screen, you have a low res version. You render it, you get the high res. This is something we've been able to do in RenderMan and Arnold forever, but there was no way to do it in Cycles. Now we can. GeoNode just is a game changer. It for us, it changed a lot of things. It was it's such an awesome tool. Okay, so any last words? No, nothing for you. Nothing for you.
It was a fun experience. I guess visit our website, blackboardvfx.com. And that's it for me.
And blender.org if you want to do some
Yeah.
publicity.
I think that everybody knows blender.org around here.
Well, they need to know realbyfake.com.
Your
I don't have
radio voice.
Yeah, my radio voice, podcast radio voice. You're listening to Blender Podcast. I would have so much fun doing this all the time. It's great. It's fun. Okay, well, thank you everybody for listening. And I was going to say we'll see you next year. What do I know? I don't know. I don't organize these.
See you in lunch.
But if I'm invited again next year, of course, I would be happy to do so, because it was a lot of fun. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.